Welcome to the Explainer, everyone. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder why certain objects are locked safely behind thick glass cases, while others are just left out in the open? Today, we're exploring a truly fascinating concept that fundamentally changes how we interact with, well, pretty much everything around us. We're going to look at the geography of the image. Specifically, we'll be examining how physical and digital spaces completely shape our understanding of the visual world. Like, why do we absolutely revere a canvas slapped on a stark white wall, but walk right past a brilliant, stunning sketch on the street? The secret, it turns out, lies in the spaces themselves. Okay, let's dive right into this. Does the location actually create the art? Now, we usually just assume an object's value is, baked right in, that a masterpiece is a masterpiece no matter where it sits. But what if I told you that an object's location is actually manufacturing its value? What if the room an object is placed in is doing more heavy lifting than the artist who actually made it? To really get this, we need to talk about what's called the invisible frame. Next time you're standing in front of a piece in a gallery, I want you to try a little mental exercise. Just zoom out. Stop looking at the painting or the sculpture for a second and look at the room. Look at the dramatic lighting, the pristine walls, the hushed atmosphere, the security guard standing by. That entire environment is an invisible frame. It's silently signaling to your brain that whatever is inside this space is important, it's valuable, and it's absolutely worthy of your reverence. See, there's this massive power dynamic at play between the inside and the outside. The inside, think museums, are big, celebrated cultural institutions. That's deemed safe. It's valuable. Objects here are officially elevated to the lofty status of art. But what about the outside? Well, the outside is often marginalized. Objects that belong to different geographies or non-Western cultures are frequently just left on the outside. Or if they are brought inside, they're completely stripped of their artistic value and simply labeled as artifacts or folk art. And that brings us to a concept we really need to define clearly: the art world. Now, we're not just talking about a loose group of painters hanging out in a studio. No, it's a highly structured, incredibly complex network of institutions, galleries, critics, and wealthy patrons. This network wields immense structural authority over visual culture. They are literally the gatekeepers. They dictate what qualifies as valuable art, and just as importantly, who gets to see it and under exactly what conditions. The scholar Svetlana Alpers actually hit the nail on the head here. She said, "Museums make it difficult for us to see in any other way." And wow, that is a profound realization if you think about it. Museums are not these perfectly neutral spaces holding objective truths. They just aren't. They are highly curated environments that actively condition our brains. They train us to view their contents as the ultimate authority, which ends up limiting our ability to even imagine alternative ways of valuing or understanding these objects. But here's the thing. This authority, it comes at a really steep historical cost. We have to talk about the violence of relocation. When objects are quite literally ripped from their original geographies to serve these grand institutional narratives, something fundamental is broken. The sheer act of moving an object from a community where it holds an active, living significance and locking it into a sterile display case, it's a profound assertion of power and ownership. So the crucial point we're looking at is what actually gets lost in that transaction, right? Look at the original site. Out there, these objects have specific names, incredibly deep, rich histories, and very clear ties to indigenous or local ownership. But once they get swallowed up by the museum system through colonial or institutional forces, they're often reduced to nameless artifacts, or they're just generalized as folk art. Their original meaning, their spiritual or community function, that's entirely stripped away. Let's look at a pretty powerful example. Take this totem pole, originally carved by the Tlingit and Haida peoples of the Pacific Northwest. In their original geography, these definitely weren't just pretty wooden carvings. They were monumental expressions of lineage, of history, and of identity. They held specific names, like Gyagang, and were deeply, deeply embedded in the social fabric of the exact communities that created them. And seeing them like this brilliantly illustrates the transformation. When these magnificent poles were removed from their lands and dropped into parks or museum collections, their entire identity changed. They were forced right into a Western visual context. Instead of being living records of ancestry, they became these static examples of quote-unquote primitive art, just sitting there for the gaze of outsiders. The physical wood didn't change one bit, but the authority of the new location completely rewrote their story. Which brings us to a pretty massive core realization. Changing the space changes the meaning, even if the object itself remains exactly the same. The physical form is totally static, right? But the visual environment absolutely dictates its worth, its identity, and its narrative. Ultimately, the space is what truly speaks to the viewer.
But this leads us to a really exciting question. Can we actually disrupt this spatial authority? Are these sacred, super-controlled spaces completely untouchable, or is it actually possible to challenge the geography of power from the inside out?
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. And one of the most spectacular modern rebellions actually happened in one of the most guarded spaces on Earth. I'm talking about Beyoncé and Jay-Z's music video for the song Apeshit, which, if you remember, was filmed right inside the Louvre Museum in Paris. Now, this wasn't just a music video. It was an absolute masterclass in challenging the geography of visual power. Just by placing themselves and their dancers, Black, marginalized bodies, right dead in the absolute center of Western art authority, they completely recontextualized the entire space. They essentially forced a global dialogue about race, exclusion, and colonial history inside these classical spaces. They changed the framing around iconic works like the Mona Lisa. They proved without a doubt that the visual landscape of even the most rigid old-school institutions can be actively contested, redefined, and reclaimed. Let's move to and see how this builds into the spaces we navigate every single day. Because this spatial authority doesn't just live in physical buildings anymore. We've entered a totally new frontier: digital geographies. The internet, our screens, the apps on our phones, these are the new rooms where visual value is constructed. Just take a look at this breathtaking snowy mountain landscape. But the way it was captured, that is what's truly fascinating here. This is the work of artist Jackie Kenney. Due to severe agoraphobia, which is a fear of open or crowded spaces, Kenney can't easily travel the world in person. So instead, she explores the globe entirely through the digital geography of Google Street View. So through this massive, literal corporate mapping tool, Kenney just clicks her way across a planet. She hunts for hidden magic, unique lighting, or these beautifully isolated moments, like this striking blue mobile home she found entirely virtually in Kyrgyzstan. She curates and frames the world from the safety of her screen, finding actual beauty in a space that was built purely for navigation and data collection. But here is the catch. Even in these seemingly endless digital spaces, we are still bound by a constructed geography. We are looking through lenses created by corporate cameras mounted on cars, satellites floating in orbit, and rigid data structures programmed by engineers. Those tools dictate our viewpoint just as rigidly as the four walls of a museum gallery. So we really have to recognize what we'll call the virtual frame, because digital spaces, they are not neutral windows to the world. They are highly curated geographies. They rely heavily on algorithms and repeating visual patterns just to make sense of the world's chaos. Yet, as Jackie Kenney's amazing work shows us, we can still find incredibly unique human stories and real beauty within all that corporate data. The digital realm is really just the newest iteration of the museum. It's a structured space that demands we think critically about exactly how and what we are being shown. So, the next time you are mindlessly scrolling through a social media feed, or maybe walking into a fancy lobby or visiting a gallery, I want to challenge you to try a new technique. It's time to see the room, not just the painting. Look at the invisible frame. Critically observe the spaces, whether physical or digital, that are presenting you with information. Ask yourself, right then and there, who built this room, and what exactly do they want me to feel? I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Where does an object actually become art in your world? Is it really the skill of the creator, or is it the platform, the gallery, or the app that frames it up for you? Question the authority of every single visual space you encounter. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes wide open and never, ever stop questioning the frame.